ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Triana ASEAN. You're with Grace.
Hello, good morning. This is Gauri.
And we are at ASEAN Dailies. We're delivering news from Southeast Asia. So let's start with our two news this morning. This is regarding the Indonesia. And then the pilots that are radicalized by ISIS, and now they're apparently now in a major security threat.
That's right. So we have two pilots who flew to Australia a couple of times, and this is also reported by the Australian media, where they are fearing that these two pilots may have been compromised, and they have been influenced by ISIS ideas, and therefore they are quite worried about what might happen to the country and also to the region as a whole.
Exactly, because when it comes to ISIS, the people whoever is involved with this community, they have been playing very smart and intelligently, especially on social media. And the way how they convinced, especially youngsters from Southeast Asia, it's very, very smart until that how they interact the people on social media, and then how influential they are and how negotiable they are on the social media. It's really, really scary that people, even all those educated people, they will just get hooked up by all those speeches and the videos and all those posts that were released by ISIS.
That's right, yeah. And also in terms of employment status, actually as of now we're still not clear on whether or not these two are still employed, are still actually flying. They are still investigating about this. And like you were just saying about the social media, because so many people, I think even when it comes to Facebook or Twitter, it really, your age doesn't matter anymore, because you can be like 12 and they'll be posing as, say, 21 or 22, or some people even up to 50, 60, 70 years old. There's really no age limit to that, and they have been very smart, and there has been some counter-terrorism efforts done online, but it seems it's still not effective enough, because more and more every day we keep getting more news that more people are joining IS, and they don't seem to be slowing down as well.
And then the most scary part of social media, especially we talk about Facebook, perhaps we are going a bit sidetracked here now. The only problem is Facebook is having now is there's no verification when you register on the Facebook. Usually when you register under a certain website, they will verify your IC or even the name from certain countries. But that's when the people can create a lot of fake accounts, and ISIS could be one of them, to create all those fake accounts, and then also using that accounts to attract most people from Southeast Asia. So what Indonesia, or perhaps furthermore ASEAN needs to do, is come up with a proper mechanism regarding the social media or internet in general, to be able to identify who's who, and then why we have to avoid, or how do we prevent ourselves from getting attacked or getting hooked by all these ISIS people.
Right, and also speaking about that, it seems that both the pilots actually mentioned on Facebook profile that they were employed by the airline until the 1st of June. At the same time, they also began posting in support of ISIS in December, and this wasn't actually realized much earlier, and it's only coming to light now, which is why they are starting to freak out as well, because they are also using a lot of what they call the extremist phrases on Facebook. One of it is, of course, the jihad. And this is one of the main reasons why a lot of people flock to ISIS in the name of jihad and sort of fighting and dying for the religion.
Yeah, and then, well, in addition to that, we also have Malaysians who are also linked to the Islamic State terror group, and they have been apparently detained by police for planning attacks in Kuala Lumpur. And it was just before that it was father and son, and who were actually caught, and then they are supposed to serve in the prison for more than 10 years now. And then apparently there are also another two people who are 28-year-old suspect had been influenced by IS ideology since 2012, and also he was taking orders from senior European ISIS leaders as well.
Right, so it's really like an intercontinental thing. It's
Yeah.
not just people from Australia. You also have Indonesia, Malaysia, and even people all the way from Europe who are
Yeah.
all being influenced. And we did speak to a professor early this week as well about ISIS and why have they become so powerful. And one of the things she mentioned also, because you just mentioned that the father and son are both jailed for 10 years, and she was also stressing about how it's important to sort of reverse the brainwash that's been done to them, because when they come back and you just put them in jail and it doesn't really change anything, and that's not really a way to solve the problem, because
Right.
they have been brainwashed so much. They've been forced to watch killings, they've been trained to kill people, to become sort of immune to that, and it's very easy for someone who has changed to remain that way. And what they should be doing is actually maybe have a little therapy session or counseling for them, and also to help them emotionally to recover and get back into society.
That's correct.
Because at the end of the day, jailing will just block them away, and it doesn't guarantee that no one else will fly to Syria and join ISIS again.
Well, sending them to jail, it could be a immediate reaction to just to stop. However, if you talk about the long term, perhaps what you as Gauri you suggested could be one of the solutions that we can use to counterpart all these issues that have been going on in Southeast Asia. Because apparently it doesn't occur in Southeast Asia only. It goes to European countries such as France, even Tunisia. Last month that there was attack. So hopefully this ISIS terrorism in general, we're just hoping that it will reduce anytime soon, but we never know what will happen, because
That's
the
right.
power of this whole community is just getting larger and larger.
Definitely goes back to legislation, goes back to social media, because we were stressing about how social media is the main tool for ISIS to spread their knowledge, their influence. So maybe more monitoring more on social media, partnering with Facebook maybe to look out for certain keywords, and that could probably help to track down these people who are planning to make a move to Syria.
Exactly. And also talking about social media, how impactful it is, where we in Malaysia, traveling back to Malaysia, we have our own very sensitive and plus controversial issues that has been going on for some time already, and this is regarding 1MDB. When we talked about 1MDB long time ago, we never thought that this will link to Najib's private account, or even now the news is going on about Rosma accounts even. So Malaysian government audit finds nothing suspicious apparently in the 1MDB people.
Sorry, I had to laugh.
It sounds ridiculous. I'm so sorry, Gauri.
Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to be sorry. Well, it is a bit of a surprise to everyone, I think.
Exactly.
And this just came out this morning. And it seems that there was a special task force set up, of course, to investigate 1MDB and all their dealings, especially because of the Wall Street Journal report that came out, and with all these allegations towards our Prime Minister, Najib. And he, of course, replied and said, I challenge your report, and that's not entirely true. So what they did is they set up a task force in the country itself to actually look into this matter, and they found nothing suspicious, which I think it wouldn't come off much of a surprise if this how do I say this, that the same party who was in the same department carrying out the probe, maybe the special task force should be completely independent of the government and also our police force.
And in addition to that, they said nothing suspicious. Come on. I wouldn't even say come on here. But
I mean, this news is rattling the whole world.
Exactly.
It's impossible that you don't find anything at all, like not one thing that is suspicious about 1MDB.
Exactly. And then according to the 1MDB president and executive director, Arukanda, he mentioned that 1MDB confirms that all documents in its possession have been submitted. And also he added that as requested by the PSC chairman, 1MDB will immediately contact the National Audit Department to seek clarity on the documents. But like audit team mentioned, there's nothing suspicious. But it was only mentioned last week by Wall Street Journal that reported, and also it was after all those investigations going on and the researchers, then they found about all this MDB issues, that all the money has been transferred to Najib's private account.
Right. I mean, like you were mentioning earlier, we talked about this for a very long time, but it has finally exploded, and it's become the topic of the whole world, I would say, not just Malaysia or Southeast Asia, especially in the US, because the whole thing was uncovered by Wall Street Journal. So hopefully the pressure will still be there, that they will keep pressing, and the people too will keep pressuring the PM to keep going with the probe and let us know the truth of what's really happening.
Yeah, he better let us know the truth, and maybe that's why he's been getting a lot of pressure, especially on social media. And then apparently he mentioned that there's too much nonsense on social media.
That's right, and he also urged the people not to be too trusting of all the news and materials that they read on social media, and he said that people should just ignore them. And I think it's very tricky when it comes to this, because of course we read a lot of things on social media. You have a lot of tabloids. Not every media out there is actually reliable, and they thoroughly do their research before reporting something. And especially it's easy to jump on the bandwagon, like when 1MDB is big, everyone else wants to make up some story and just sort of boost their popularity that way. But at the same time, I think there are a few media that we can really trust and that really carry out their analysis and back up their journalism with proper evidence. And I think one of them is Wall Street Journal, that's been around for so long, and everyone has been reading it for years and years and years, and that is not just any tabloid that produces like rubbish news. So I think it's up to the people to know what they can trust and what they cannot trust on social media.
Yeah, and also hope that just because Prime Minister Najib announced that not all of it is true and they don't trust social media, wouldn't stop all this investigation that's been going on from the Wall Street Journal and also from other investigators, because we are talking about this huge amount of money, $11 billion, and that's even if you live life with all that money, you don't even be able to finish that money.
I think the best way, Grace, if he's going to tell people that this is not the truth, then tell us what is the truth, and everyone will stop trusting whatever they read on social media.
To him, what's truth is nothing has been transferred, and he's very transparent on that, area. So it is very tricky, but then it's regarding the Wall Street Journal is involved already after the investigation. So now people are falling more towards that side rather than our PM side, because all this how Najib has been working, functioning as a prime minister in this nation. It's just dropping more and more. And now I mentioned briefly before that now Rosma is also involved in this 1MDB issues. So we can expect to hear more news from regarding 1MDB news
I think
as soon as possible.
At this point, the people will believe whoever that says something and gives some evidence. And it's not just about somebody. I mean, if Wall Street Journal had just said this without any backing up, without being strong about it, people wouldn't have believed them either. But the thing is, they stand by what they say. And if our Prime Minister were to do the same, then he also has to back it up with some facts, some papers, some sort of evidence, and then the people will be on his side.
Definitely. So we'll be back after this short break. You are with Grace and Gauri at the ASEAN Daily. Stay tuned.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Drian ASEAN. You're at the political aspect of Southeast Asian news with Grace.
And this is Gauri, and we are here on our ASEAN Daily to continue our news commentary for Friday morning.
That's correct. So let's move on to news regarding Myanmar. And apparently EU slams Myanmar intermarriage bill. And this is a pretty controversial issues when it comes to Myanmar marriage bill. And it is also discriminatory and also risks undermining the democratic progress. And after Parliament passed this legislation this week, in another sign of hardline Buddhist nationalist influence as well. So, like I mentioned, this is very controversial, and this Buddhist women's special marriage bill, which was approved by the combining houses of parliament, is a part of a package of laws originally suggested by the radical monks.
Right, so the interesting thing about this bill, which was published last year in December, actually laid out some rules to regulate the marriage between a Buddhist woman and men of other faith. And I think the most controversial thing about this bill is it's only targeted at women.
Yeah.
So technically the men can marry whoever they like. But when it comes to the women, they actually have to get permission and also publicly announce the engagement. So they cannot simply marry outside of their faith if they are a Buddhist woman. And the couple must also apply to the local authorities for permission. Can you imagine that? When you want to get married to someone just because they're of a different faith, that you actually have to get permission from someone who is not even your parents. It's just your local authority who thinks they can meddle with your life.
It's more like how just non-Muslims get married to Muslim, but they have to get permission and sort of get approved by the government itself. But then here, it's regarding to the equal right and the women's right here. And apparently the population control law allowing the regional government to introduce family planning regulations to lower birth rates was approved by the president in May as well. And like you mentioned before, the bill supposed to be approved by the whole party, and as well as just to get married to Buddhist partner. And this is regarding the again, in regards to religion here, Buddhist majority Myanmar has suffered from the rising religious intolerance in the past few years, and it also followed by the waves of a lot of bloodshed, especially in the Rakhine State, and then perhaps 3 years ago, they mainly targeted the Muslim, and also it has since erupted in the pockets across the country. So not only the Myanmar holds the problem with the Muslim, but also with the other religion as well.
Right, I think because they have so many different ethnicities as well, it's always been a problem for Myanmar right from the start. And this bill actually has not been signed by their President Thein Sein, and it's also the second of 4 proposed laws that is supposed to go through Parliament, that rights group viewing it as exploiting fears between Buddhist and Muslim communities. And of course, this whole thing goes back even to the Rohingya issue, how the Muslims were treated quite badly in Myanmar.
Yep.
And this is also as a means of population control, it seems, for the governments to introduce family planning regulations to lower birth rate. So on one hand, you have to get permission, and on the other hand, you also cannot have babies whenever you like, because the government is exercising a population control in the country. And going back to this whole thing, this is the whole reason why EU has stepped forward and slammed Myanmar because of all this intermarriage bill and population control bill. Because these are things that should be a basic right for people, and it's not something that you would want to always go through the government.
Correct.
Because it's probably a personal decision that goes back to your marriage, to whether or not you are ready to have a family or have a baby for that matter, or even when it comes to marrying someone outside the faith. And of course, it's not it's easier said than done. And in Myanmar itself, having different faith has always been an issue, as we have seen it happen. So I'm not sure how Myanmar is going to react to this, but of course they would probably come forward and also give their response to EU soon enough.
And then the ironic part here is Myanmar is in the transition period where from military government to democratic government. That means people will have their own freedom when it comes to human rights of any kind. But then when they restrict a certain, especially when it comes to marriage, it is really only unfair on the people, Myanmar citizens. And it's also, they relate all those issues to religion again and again. So it is something they really need to look at, and perhaps EU here that they are interfering in this in Myanmar's intermarriage. Maybe it could be helpful to be able to step further into to resolve these issues. Well, moving on to next political issues is about the Malaysian in annual human trafficking, where US wants to upgrade the report regarding the human trafficking in Malaysia.
So it looks like Malaysia is actually getting promoted. So back then we had a really bad rating when it comes to human rights. And actually I'm not too sure what has prompted US to give us this upgrade, besides the fact that if they actually blacklist a certain country, that this country has very bad human trafficking report, then they don't actually have a free trading decision when it comes to that country. And this is something that they want to change. They want to have a free trade deal with Southeast Asian countries, especially Malaysia, and that's one of the reasons why they're moving us up the tier from tier 3 to tier 2 on the watch list.
And it also looks like US wants to, give helping hands to Malaysia when it comes to human trafficking. That's also because Malaysia is chairing the ASEAN this year, and also we have the image on the face on the behalf of all those 10 countries, as well as the upgrade follows the international scrutiny and also outcry over the Malaysian efforts to combat these human trafficking issues after the discovery this year of the scores of the oldest graves in the people smuggling camps nearby the northern border with Thailand.
Right.
So yes, some U.S. lawmakers and the policymakers, as well as human rights advocates, they need to really step into these issues, and they're also expected Malaysia to remain on tier 3, like you mentioned, this year, given it the slow pace of convictions in human trafficking cases, as well as to pervasive trafficking industries.
Right, and besides the mass grave issue that happened early this year, there's really been not much of an effort from Malaysian side to actually do something about the human trafficking issue. It's I think it's still going on, still bad, and of course we have done one thing, but that's still not enough. Although we are getting promoted up the tier, there's still a lot more work to be done. We still have a lot of refugee issues in Malaysia. People trying to sell these people off just to make money in another country, and I think all this needs to be addressed as well if we really want to move up the tier in terms of human trafficking. And we should not start being comfortable or take pride in the fact that we have moved up, because we still do not have a very satisfactory record when it comes to human trafficking or even human rights for that matter.
So the Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch Asia Division, his name is Phil Robertson, he said they have done very little to improve the protection from abuse that migrant workers face, as well as this would seem to be some of the political rewards from the United States, and he wants to urge the US Congress to look long and hard at who was making these decisions on such an upgrade. And apparently Malaysia has estimated around 2 million illegal migrant laborers, and many of them who work in the condition of forced labor under employers and in recruitment, and they are not treated really fairly under these conditions, and even the wages they are getting is very little. So perhaps we need to have come up with a mechanism to protect them and also give the fair treatment.
I think I totally agree with Phil Robertson here, who was stunned. I was also stunned when I saw the news.
Yep.
So probably the US is doing this for other reasons, like we mentioned earlier, because they want to have a freer deal in terms of trade when it comes to the economy perspective for the relationship between US and Malaysia. But at the same time, when they want to promote a country, make sure that the country has actually done something and has some substantial effort when it comes to addressing human rights. And you mentioned that we have 2 million illegal migrant laborers in the country, which is absolutely true, and most of them do not have valid documents, and they're not even being given a place to stay or being given a salary that they can survive on. So definitely I would agree with Phil that they should look into this and make sure we are really doing our part in addressing human trafficking, and then they can promote us.
Yes, exactly. So human trafficking, human rights, with the help of US, we hope to improve these particular issues in Southeast Asia. Let's move on to the next neighbor, which is Philippines. Apparently, the China violated international law by seizing the territory in the region with overwhelming force, and this is coming from the Philippines.
All right, and this is another ongoing issue that we've had regarding the South China Sea, which created a lot of tension between Philippines and China, and they've also brought the US in for this matter to help them to sort of intimidate China on the issue. And it seems that Philippines filed the suit in court in January 2013, of course, because of the violation of the exclusive economic zone as defined under UN clause. And Manila called those waters the West Philippine Sea, but China is of course still being stubborn and saying that it actually belongs to them, that part of the South China Sea.
Exactly, and a lot of claims and also clarification is needed here. And according to International Court of Justice, Del Rosario, he mentioned that we are here because we wish to clarify our maritime entitlement in South China Sea. The question over which the tribunal has jurisdiction, this is a matter of that it is most important not only to the Philippines but also to the coastal states that has border with the South China Sea. And this is very, very true because this issue, I don't know how long it has been going on, and nothing looks like it's solving properly. And at the same time, the power of China towards the South China Sea is only getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
They're even started building their own constructions and the structures on the territory just to mark that this is a part of their land, not the others.
And by doing that, they've also caused a lot of environmental damage, which is also another issue that's of concern from the Philippines, because they call it the destructive and hazardous fishing practices by harvesting of endangered species. And apart from that, China has also been exhibiting a lot of aggressive behavior, like you were just saying as well, that they don't seem like they're backing down anytime soon. So, and ASEAN and China itself also have not really concluded a proper solution or a proper binding code of conduct. Although there was a declaration back in 2002 that was signed to resolve disputes in the region, that has not been very handy. So it's still floating. this whole issue.
So that's the end of our political aspect of Southeast Asia. But stay tuned. We will be delivering news on the economical aspect of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Trian ASEAN. You're at ASEAN Dailies with Grace.
And this is Gauri. And of course, we are going to bring you news from the economic side of Southeast Asia.
This is pretty exciting, or should I say it's quite a surprise, because
you are an evil person.
Well, Aussie dollars is almost equal to Singapore dollars, Gauri. So
right,
do we say congratulations to Singaporeans, or
offer your condolences to
Yes.
Australia. I don't
yeah.
know. So, given the Greek debt crisis, actually, that has also another side is the stock markets, which crashed in China. It seems that it has caused the Aussie dollar to fall to 99 cents against the Sing dollar very soon, says a head of forex research at Maybank Singapore.
And like you mentioned, Aussie dollar dropped as low as the 1.0019 against the Singapore. It was just yesterday, and then it has fallen about 8% since the start of the year and 60% since last July. And now it is at the weakest since the global financial crisis in 2009. And it is also facing, just like how ringgit is facing, it is just going to drop and drop and drop. And its lower rate means that travelers and their families funding their children education in Australia will be able to stretch the Singapore dollar further. And however, there is a down part where local firms with investment here, such as the Singtel, which owns the country's second largest telecoms firm, Optus, could be affected. And also other companies in Australia can be affected because of the drop in the Australian dollars.
And the head of Forex Research also said that Singapore investors with property in Australia will actually have to pay less in Singapore dollars to service their mortgages, which is, of course, a huge benefit or advantage for the Singaporean side, not so much for the Australians. And there was also another opinion who said that the property market in Australia could also be affected by China's economic uncertainty, which has, of course, also sort of had a negative downfall since a couple of days ago. And apart from that, Chinese investors who also have a lot of demand in Australia property market will probably liquidate or hold off their asset purchases, and therefore exerting downward pressure on the housing price. I'm not too sure if that is going to be a good thing for Australia.
For Australian, I think it's sort of a negative news because they will lose quite a lot of values when it comes to Australian dollars. However, when it comes to Singapore, for those who have been supporting their children in Australia, now they don't need to really worry about it because it's almost equal to Singaporean dollar value. And also for investors who have been investing those properties in Australia, they need to just pay less. So Singapore will have a lot of sort of benefits. However, Australian will be facing a lot of loss.
And it seems that the the Aussie dollar has actually been sliding in value over the back of falling commodity prices, and also because of the country's mining investment boom has already reached the end of its cycle. And one key factor to this is, of course, lower demand for iron ore from China, which is its largest importer. So one small decision from China can actually impact the entire Australian economy, and that's how powerful China is in this region. And finally, of course, like we were saying earlier, it seems the Singdollar at any time could fall down to 99 cents for the Australian dollar.
Right. Well, talking about the China stock, we've been talking about how it is affecting the dollars in Australia and Singdollar as well. But not only that, internally, the economic in China has been dropping as well. And while we are focusing on all this Greek economic and then the debts that the Greece has been borrowing from many other countries and the community, China is also facing sort of difficulties and in economic growth. And it doesn't look very positive here when it comes to stock marketing, because apparently the China stock market is almost up to the crash up in the Shanghai. And it doesn't look very positive. And also all these Beijing taxi drivers, they are well versed in the latest political gossip and the cabbies in Shanghai. So even all those ordinary people, they are very well aware of what's going on in the stock.
That's right. And speaking of the China stock market losses, they have lost $3 trillion. We're not just talking about million or billion.
Exactly.
It's actually $3 trillion in the past 3 weeks. And more than 1,000 companies have immediately stopped trading of any kind. No buying, no selling, no hurting the economy further. And like you were saying, in China, actually, the elderly crowd, the younger crowd, everyone is very well versed with what's going on in the stock market, because all of them spend most of their time trading and buying stocks, selling stocks, and which is why a lot of financial rumors are actually going around in the country, and this definitely doesn't prove to be a positive outcome.
Exactly. And then a lot of people are saying that it is almost impossible for the market to bounce back anytime soon, and that will affect not only China but then surrounding countries as well, who have been dealing with the China's when it comes to businesses, any stock market areas.
Of course, yeah.
And I hope that we can't just like say we hope that it will be better, but perhaps as ASEAN, we can help build up the relationship with the China even more, and perhaps it is a time for all those investors and businessmen maybe to just hold back for a while and wait for the stock market to perhaps regain its faith from investors as well. Well, let's just move on to the social and art cultural part of Southeast Asia, where ASEAN must
step up
regarding this climate change.
Right, and this is very important because ASEAN, a lot of the ASEAN countries actually depend on agriculture when it comes to their economic gain, and because of this, when it comes to climate change, it affects the food security and also the livelihood of these ASEAN countries, because it involves resources such as forests, seas, rivers, lands, and also it involves the ecosystem. And climate change can actually complicate the whole ecosystem, and therefore also affect negatively on the agriculture as well as the natural resources.
Yes, and also this is the update news from what we reported before regarding the climate change in ASEAN. And when it comes to food security, livelihood, and other needs of ASEAN citizens are at stake in the region's vast resources such as forests, the seas, rivers, land, and ecosystem. But the problem is climate change is threatening all the shared growth reliant to the agriculture and the natural resources. So climate change is not only the problem to overall, but when it comes to ASEAN, it also affects our strength areas in agriculture as well.
And also argues that climate change is actually undermining our viability in agriculture in the region, and it can be a bad news for many of the small-scale farmers who depend a lot on livestock, and also people who are in the fishing industry, for them to go out there and actually get their source of income, because climate change changes the entire ecosystem, and also the seas get rough, probably the land is not as fertile anymore, so it's very important that ASEAN steps up. We do have a conference coming up in Paris for in terms of the climate change, talking about what's the current issue happening in the world right now, global warming, whatever it is, and how it's affecting us. I think this is something that we tend to overlook because we stress more on the politics and economy usually, and we sort of don't really pay attention to the ecosystem, to the environmental side of Southeast Asia.
But a lot of NGOs and also organizations have come up with their own mechanism and policies towards the ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So as much as it is a very problem, and in fact carbon dioxide emission is just getting worse and worse throughout the Southeast Asia. So it is perhaps the time, really, before it gets late, it's time to look at our climate change and really care about our environment. And that our last news seems pretty very positive, and it's a really nice news to end with our ASEAN Daily here. Apparently this year's National Day parade to narrate have the Singapore story here.
Right, so the Singapore National Day is happening in about a month from now, and for this year they have decided that they will be telling the story of Singapore for their national parade that will be happening in the country, and they will talk about how far the country has come in the past 50 years.
And also, they will be showing how Singapore have been crafting their whole society and its own unique identity. It could be a very small region, but it is also a very powerful region in the ASEAN. So it will be a very beautiful performance for those who really want to travel to Singapore. I know Singapore dollar has gone really, really up, but then still, it could be worth traveling there to see the performance, also to celebrate this National Day in Singapore.
Right.
So that's it for our ASEAN Daily News today on the Friday. Look for us, more news, and also leave us feedback on our social media on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
That's right. And also, don't forget to download our very own Durian ASEAN app right now on your mobile phones, and you can stream us right away from your phones wherever you are. And for all the latest updates, make sure to go to our website, durianasean.com, where you'll find all the news about Southeast Asia as well as all our podcasts, and you'll also find out what's new with us.
So we'll be back for the next session. We'll have an interview about this Borak
art series that will be happening.
So stay tuned.